Hello everybody and welcome to the exclusive narrated version of my Westwood Gazelle W16 restoration. So if you haven't already watched the subtitle version, this is my latest project. It has been ongoing for about 5 months. I've been working on it nearly every day and it has taken loads of time and quite a bit of money as well. But thank you once again for all of your support. It does mean a great deal. So without you, it would be tough to do a project of this size. It is pretty big. And this machine was actually manufactured in 1981, which means at the time of recording this video, it is 41 years old. As with all my restorations, the first thing I do is assess the situation with all of the mechanical parts. So I'm just going to remove the bonnet so I can gain access to the engine, and we'll take a look and see what is wrong with it. The first thing I noticed was the amount of carbon in this engine. It does seem to have been burning oil at some point. Taking a look in the bore, I discovered that there's actually a stuck valve. I did turn the engine over and this valve did not move. The bore in cylinder 1 also does look to be scored. Now taking a look in cylinder number 2, neither of the valves are stuck. However, the scoring in the bore is even worse than on the other side. Very bad in here. Also, the rings have been letting oil past them. You can see the oil is all congregating here. So pretty bad, and it does explain the amount of carbon. So just checking the oil level, it does seem to have the right amount in it. So maybe it's just from natural wear and tear. Maybe this engine has had quite a bit of use. Next up, I'm checking the electrics. Okay, so all the dashboard lights that I would expect to work do work. Also, the engine does turn over on the key. So now I'm going to do a compression test. Cylinder 1, as you can see, has no compression. Cylinder 2 does have compression, but it is low. So the reason why cylinder 1 was bad was because of the stuck valve I mentioned before. Now for a spark test. As you can see there, the engine is getting a spark. So now that I know exactly what's going on with the engine, which is the most important part of this restoration, I'm going to dismantle the entire machine, I'm going to rebuild the engine, and I can get all of the body panels ready for sandblasting and powder coating. No surprise here, the pulley is stuck. Once I had the engine to deck pulley removed, I could get a hydraulic puller onto the main pulley block, and this enabled me to remove it. So overall it wasn't too bad. I've had much worse. In fact, I've had pulley blocks in the past which have been almost impossible to remove. Here's a good view of the underside, just to show you what everything looks like. Removing the throttle and choke cables, it does actually have 2 separate cables for this. They are independent. I was just removing this side panel for the engine because I couldn't get the last electrical wire through, and then I discovered this huge mouse nest, which probably explains why the bore is so scored, because of the overheating. Just to elaborate on that a bit further for anybody who isn't very familiar with engines, basically this is an air-cooled engine and it relies on the cool air being sucked in by the flywheel and blown down the cooling fins, and yeah, basically the mouse nest is insulating it so it can't cool. With all the wires, bolts and cables detached, the engine is ready to be lifted out. I'll be coming back to the engine fairly soon, but first I need to dismantle the rest of the machine. Draining the fuel tank. Right, so this is actually quite amazing. The fuel which came out of here was very yellow, but it was clean. There was no dirt in it, which was pretty nice. I actually have a very old push mower, which I use to consume the old fuel. So yeah, I managed to cut quite a bit of grass with this stale stuff. It is quite amazing, but it worked pretty well. Now for removing all of the electrical components, I am being very careful because everything needs to go back exactly as it was before. Also, I am going to rewire this machine. The wiring which is in it currently is not great, so it would benefit from some new wiring. That's as far as I can go with the wiring until I've removed the centre console, because the wires have to be threaded through. So what I'm doing here is removing the gear lever and also the steering. We've got the steering quadrant, the steering gear, and of course all of the bolts that hold it together. With the centre console lifted out, it makes it much easier for me to gain access to the steering gear. So I'm now removing it. The gear is a bit stuck, so I'm using a small puller to remove this. Inside the steering shaft we actually do have two bronze bushings. A bearing puller makes it very simple to remove these. With all of that out of the way, I can now finish off the wiring, I can pull it back through, and then that can be sorted out later. The final part of the steering system, which is the steering quadrant, can also be lifted out. Moving to the rear of the machine, I can remove the seat, the wheels, and basically everything which I can gain access to at the moment. With the wheels removed, I can now access the gearbox. There are several linkages which run to it, such as the brake and the gear shifter. So it's so much easier to do this with the wheels off. Even easier if you can sort of tip the machine on its side, which obviously you can only really do with the engine out. I've now got the whole thing upside down, which enables me to remove the gearbox with ease. There's always one stubborn bolt, but luckily I can cut off the head very easily with a hacksaw. With everything detached from the gearbox, it's now very simple to lift out. I will also be cleaning up, dismantling and rebuilding the gearbox later. Okay, so there is actually an accessory port on the back of this machine, which is for the lawn groomer. Westwood did make a lawn groomer. Now for the main body panel. This can actually only be removed on this particular machine with the gearbox off, because it does block access to some of the bolts. Not only this, but the fuel tank is at the back of the machine, which is very unusual. Wes would soon move that to the middle in the main center console. I can imagine it's probably because of the access though. It is very hard to get to the tank if you need to remove it. Spider warning, there is a spider. Well, actually this machine was full of spiders. This was just one of the little friends that was roaming around in there. Just a few more odd bits and bobs to remove, like the parking brake plunger. This is actually a single piece. I've saved all the decals so I can recreate those later. And now just for the final disassembly of the main chassis, we've got the axle, we've got the wheels at the front, also the brake pedal and the snowplow lever. As you saw with the steering arm, things don't seem to detach from this front axle very easily. I believe somebody has been working on this in the past, since the axle beam is a different colour. It should be the dark grey colour, but it's actually black. I came to the conclusion that the stub axles are actually both slightly bent, which means it's very difficult to pull them out of the axle beam. These really are the last few pieces. We've got the deflector flap there, which will have to be recreated. This is the triangular belt guide support. And finally the brake/clutch mechanism and pedal. In case you're wondering what this is, it is the sensor for the brake pedal. There we go, that is the whole machine disassembled. Some parts will have to be disassembled further, for example this deflector flap, so I'm going to do that, but also I need to repair anything which is damaged prior to having everything sandblasted and powder coated. With the deflector flap frame disassembled, I can now move on to repairing the battery tray. The battery tray is actually very small, so somebody's had a bigger battery in it than what is initially recommended. So this is going to have to be bent back and then welded. Here we have the snowplow and the deck. The deck has got a lot of things wrong with it, so this is going to require quite a bit of work. The snowplow, very simple, it just needs to be disassembled and then repainted. Overall it looks like it is just lacking paint, it's a bit rusty, but actually it does need quite a bit of fabrication work done to it. A lot of the components were metal on metal, and they have worn quite badly, as you can see here. This pin, at least what used to resemble a pin, used to hold on the outer frame, which slotted through one of 3 holes, but yes, those holes have all joined together, and you can no longer set the height. There is a close-up. It is just one elongated hole. The other side wasn't too bad, but again, it does need to be changed. The underside of the deck doesn't look terrible. The blades will have to be replaced. They're mounted onto these 2 large discs, or dishes. The left side one removes very easily. The right hand side, on the other hand, is well and truly stuck. It's very stuck. I think somebody must have had the left hand side off before to work on it. I'm not having much luck with the air hammer, so now I'm going to try and quench it and then air hammer it again, and hopefully it will come off. As you can see, again, no luck. So I'm going to have to resort to cutting the bolts off, which is not a major problem because they're going to be replaced anyway. Well, that's half the problem solved. That's the main disc off. I can access the actual stuck part. But now, of course, we do still have this main hub. After battling with a hydraulic puller for a while, I decided to go with a harmonic puller. And that worked. So overall, it could have been worse. I could have bent it, and that would have been a disaster. We're not out of the woods yet though, because these machines, these decks, these early Westwoods were designed in a way that you sandwiched 2 hubs together with the spindle in the centre, and the bearings would seize into the hubs, and then you actually couldn't remove them, you couldn't split them. The rust is always a big problem. So I need to take this top cover off, remove the, well if I can, I'll remove the 2 timing pulleys, and then hopefully I can try and split one side of the bearing hubs. Oh, there's movement. We have a friend in here. Another friend. Let's try the first timing pulley. Nope, that's stuck. Everything is stuck. I'll try the other side. And no luck over here either. I'm going to use a 3-leg puller, which is obviously better than 2. We've got more contact. It's risky. I have bent pulleys in the past doing it this way. But it seems this time it's not too stuck. With the first pulley off, I can now try and hammer the spindle through. I know it seems like a bad way of doing it, but obviously I can't fit the entire deck in a hydraulic press. There's no movement. This was as expected. So the next thing, which I'm going to try and do, is remove the bolts for the hub and then try and pry the housings off, because the bearings are actually rust welded into the housings, into the bearing hubs. It looks like we have movement. It's almost there. Whoa! Yeah, they can go with a pop. You can just see how much rust builds up inside these hubs. Now for the other side. Now I couldn't actually pull the pulley off on this one. This is even worse. I would have just damaged it. So this time I'm going to do it the other way around. I'm going to try and split the hubs first of all, and then put the pulley in the press. That's all the bearings pulled off. Now finally the pulley, which is moving very easily. This is the good thing about it. Once you've got everything off the deck, the hydraulic press can do nearly everything. It's just getting it off the deck in the first place, which is always tricky. Moving on. Since all the spindles have been removed, I can cut off all of the other bolts. I have to cut them off because they've all been rounded off, because obviously the heads are underneath the deck, and all of the debris when the blades are spinning wear them down, and it's just not possible to put a spanner on them. This is the rear deck lift and level mechanism. The cables usually do rust badly, they do fray, these will have to be replaced. Also the springs, they do work, but they've seen better days. With the entire deck dismantled, I can now start working on repairing it. As you can see, there's been some repair work in the past and it just doesn't look very nice. So I'm going to take these reinforcing bars off and weld some new ones on, and also some new height adjusters. I just found some scrap metal lying around, actually off another Westwood machine, and I'm going to convert these into the height adjusters. With that done, it's now time to work on the frame. Now these frames are terrible. The caster wheels have had it. You can see the mounting holes, because it's metal on metal, have worn incredibly large and they have cracked. So I'm going to cut the ends off and I'm going to weld some new ends on with the correct diameter hole. Now for the caster wheels. These have worn very badly and the rear ones have been welded in place. I believe the reason for doing this is because when you go into reverse they can actually contact the deck and get stuck, but I'm still going to put them back to pivoting. The brackets are bent, so what I'm going to do is cut the middle section out and then keep the two side sections because they're okay, and then weld the new piece in, and that should straighten them out. Now the caster wheel brackets have been completed, all of the deck parts are now ready to be sent for sandblasting. There is one more thing I need to do first though, and that is to disassemble the snowplow. You can really see how the original powder coat peels off and bubbles very easily. When I get it done, it is actually going to be primed, and this should prevent this from happening in the future. I really don't think this plough has had any use at all. The rubber edge is in very good condition, so much so that I should be able to reuse it. The snowplow can be added to the list of items that need to be sandblasted and powder coated. I'm just going to check the lights in the bonnet. One of them is working, the other one is not. I don't think you can actually get these bulbs anymore, so I will have to source another one from a different machine. Also, the plastic grill, the white grill on the front, unfortunately has melted very badly, and I can't source a new one of those, so I'm going to have to use a black version, which is fine. That is actually quite original to a Gazelle anyway, just not the very early ones. So I'm just removing the final parts, and then we are ready to take everything for sandblasting. And if you're wondering why I don't do the sandblasting myself, I do some of it, but the majority I can't do because I don't have a big enough setup. And the same with the powder coating. There we go. That is everything. It's a full pallet load of parts. There is a great deal that needs to be done. So in the meantime, whilst we're waiting for that to be sandblasted, I'm going to work on the engine. I'm going to rebuild it. First of all, I'm just inspecting the oil to see if I can see any glitter. If you can see like a glittery effect in the oil, it does mean that there is metal in it. But this looks very clean. So it's now time to disassemble the engine. On nearly every single Briggs & Stratton opposed to an engine that I've worked on, these screws are either so stuck in that it just rounds the heads off, or they've already been rounded off. So what I do is I get a angle grinder and I put a nice cut into the screw head. Then you can use a flathead screwdriver, and also the heat generated does assist with freeing off the screws. onto removing the flywheel. I'm going to use a puller to remove it, but first I'm cleaning the threads. The reason why is because if you don't clean the threads and they're very dirty, you probably won't be able to get the bolts in far enough, and if you don't get the bolts in far enough, it puts a great deal of strain on those few threads that the bolts have gone into, and it can even crack the flywheel. As I tighten these nuts, it is pulling up on the flywheel, and it tends to go with a bit of a pop. And there he goes. This is the intake and the carburetor assembly. I will be fully dismantling and rebuilding the carburetor later. These bolts which hold the muffler on can be very troublesome, but not today. You do have to be careful though, because if they are very stuck, it's worth working them backwards and forwards. That should prevent shearing them, but even if you do that, sometimes they do shear. We have a sheared bolt here. So I'm just heating it up, just to try and crack the rust, and then using vice grips to hopefully remove it. Off comes the starter motor. Now I actually do have a reconditioned starter motor already, so I should be able to fit that to this engine. This is the governor lever which I'm removing. This will be interesting. I'm removing the first cylinder head. So let's take a look in here. I'm expecting to be full of carbon, but we'll be able to, for the first time, properly inspect the bore. You can see there is carbon, there is oil. It's not horrific, but obviously it is burning oil, because you can see the amount of oil that's come past the rings. But that part of the bore looks okay. And now for the other cylinder, this is the side with the stuck valve. You can see there is some carbon, some oil. If it wasn't for the stuck valve, both sides do look very similar. So the bore, this part that we can see here at least, doesn't look terrible. I think the rings are worn on both pistons. Here's a demonstration of the stuck valve. So you can see as the piston is going up and down, only one valve is moving. So let's take a look in the back and I'll remove both of the pistons. I always like to inspect the big ends of the connecting rods, and as you can see we do have some wear. It is quite a common issue with these opposed twin engines. The upper piston sometimes can get starved of oil because it is not pressure lubricated, it's actually from a slinger. It slings the oil up there instead of being pressure lubricated. Okay, now with the piston removed, we can take a look at the other side of the big end. We also do have wear here, and some horrific scoring on the side of the piston skirt. That is really bad. And as you can see, we do have excessive damage to the side of the bore. Now this is actually an aluminium bore, not a cast iron sleeve. Let's see what it's like on the opposite side. So we again do have some scoring on the big end of the conrod. As expected, we do also have the wear on the other side of the big end. The piston skirt is not as bad. We do have some visible wear, some scratches, but it's definitely not as bad. This is acceptable condition. The future is looking grim for this crankcase, so I'm going to remove the sump, the crankshaft, all of the remaining components, and then I need to really source a replacement crankcase. It is possible to repair them and use oversized pistons and rings, but it's not worth it. Next up we have the camshaft. This is what times the engine. Then there is the crankshaft. In the bottom of the sump we have the oil slinger and the governor. The reason for disassembling it fully is so I can clean it properly. All the sludge builds up in the sump. Now I've just found a replacement crankcase. This is not the one which we've just seen, this is a different one, and it has cast iron sleeves, which is an upgrade. So this is what I'm going to be using. I can now continue, I'll clean it all up, and then we can rebuild the engine with this upgraded crankcase. I'm going to be using my hot washer. Now some people in the past have thought this is actually an abrasive washer, but it isn't, it's just hot degreaser. It does work very effectively. Very good for the preliminary clean. It doesn't get everything off, but it's just a great start. The initial clean is complete, and as you can see, it is looking much better. It will be cleaned again, thoroughly, but there's no point cleaning it thoroughly yet because I still need to clean all the carbon off, I need to lap the valves, we have to hone it. There is just so much to do, so many messy things to do, which require more cleaning afterwards anyway, so there's no point cleaning unnecessarily. Onto the honing. So I'm applying this oil, the honing oil, and then I'm going to use a ball hone. They're quite interesting looking things, and they do a very good job. And what we're looking for is a good cross hatching. What we don't want to do is just put the hone into the cylinder and just keep it stationary in one place, because that would just not work. It needs to have good cross hatching. So reciprocating, moving fairly quickly. And that is the sort of thing we're looking for. You can see the cross hatching pattern. The face wants to be nice and flat, so I don't have any really expensive machining tools, so what I'm going to use is a granite block and a piece of round sandpaper. It is possible to create a flat face doing it this way. It's quite labour intensive, it does wear you out afterwards, but yeah, it does work. And the same process has to be done for the cylinder heads. New valves! Yep, so I'm going to be fitting brand new valves to the engine, along with new pistons, but these need to be lapped in, and also later on I will be setting the clearance gaps. But for now, just the lapping needs to be done. This is achieved with valve lapping compound. There's the first valve done, so you can see we've now got this different colour rim, and that is the seal which is created between the seat and the valve. One down, 3 to go. And through the magic of editing, all 4 are now done. Before I go any further, I really want to start cleaning some of these components. They are very dirty, they want to be cleaned, ready for when I reinstall them. That's the old parts cleaned, but also I have new parts, new connecting rods, new pistons, new piston rings. So what I need to do is check the ring gap, and that is within spec, so the rings are good. I can now assemble the pistons ready for installation. The crankcase has been thoroughly cleaned, which means I can now install the first component, which is the crankshaft. I'm not putting jam on here, by the way. This is assembly lubrication. It's much stickier than oil, so it'll actually stick to the components and stay in place whilst we assemble the rest of the engine, so that when we then start the engine, nothing is starting dry. In goes the first piston. I'm setting the correct bolt torque with a torque wrench. With the pistons installed, I can now fit the valve tappets and then the camshaft. A very crucial part of the camshaft installation is to align the timing marks. You can see them just there, the 2 dots. Next we have the valves, and I will have to set the valve clearances. As these are brand new, you can see there is no clearance at all, so the valves need to be filed. This will adjust the valve clearance. And the thing is with these, if you file off too much, you can weld onto the end of them again and then file it back. But it is best to be very careful and just measure many times. Before I can go any further, I need to clean all of the bolts which are used to reassemble the rest of the engine. So first of all, I'm using white spirit. I'll then sandblast them. I'll then use cold blue, and that just gives them an initial bit of protection before I can then come along and paint the entire engine. And there they all are lined up. It always looks really good when you do this. It's very satisfying. I've got a few more parts to sandblast and paint. I will prime them and then I'll just paint everything assembled. That's enough parts ready now, so I can continue reassembling the engine. I've got the cylinder heads just here, new head gasket, install all the bolts, taking care to put the 3 longer bolts in this closest corner, the bottom right corner, and then I can torque up all of the bolts. And I'm installing the back plate, and this is one of the nice things about doing these narrations. I can let you know about previous restorations. The last opposed twin engine I did leaked on the back plate. I believe Briggs & Stratton did actually add 2 more bolts, or maybe 1 more bolt, just to rectify this problem. But I'm using sealant, so that will guarantee no oil leaks out of the back plate. I can now reassemble the sump, so that's the oil slinger and the governor. And then just the oil seal, and then the sump can be fitted. Now when I fit these sumps, it tends to be the case that you have to assist it when fitting it. It doesn't always just slide straight on, because everything has to mesh together. So just turning the crankshaft ever so slightly will persuade it on, and that way you don't have to draw the sump onto the crankcase. If you do that, you're just going to cause many problems. So yeah, just turn the crankshaft slightly, it makes everything so much easier. I've now got the engine to the stage where I want to paint it. I'm going to use some very high temperature paint. I think it's up to 750 degrees Celsius. It's barbecue paint, and it's pretty good. While it's drying, I'm going to start working on the carburetor. Sandblasting these intake manifolds is always a nice way of dealing with them. The paint always flakes. You just got to be careful. You've got to make sure everything is cleaned out thoroughly afterwards. A nice coat of etch primer, and I can leave it to dry. In the meantime, I will crack on with the carburetor. First of all, it needs to be fully disassembled. You can see all the horrible stale fuel and the broken gaskets. This all needs to be thoroughly cleaned out. This is the float and needle valve. That will regulate the amount of fuel that enters the carburetor. There is a bit of a sound coming from the float, so I think I'll change that. And this little part on the front is the fuel pump, which is relatively simple. It's just you've got to make sure you remember where the springs go, because it does have several springs inside it. You can see there's a small one, there is the big one with the little cup underneath it, and then once you take the diaphragm off, you'll find another spring, just to make it complicated. Just lurking under here is the other spring I mentioned. There it is. But if you do buy the full rebuild kit, you get given a load of them anyway. So with everything fully disassembled, I'm going to put it into the ultrasonic cleaner and give it a good clean. About half an hour to 40 minutes later, everything is looking much better. It will have loosened any dirt, and I can use carburetor cleaners to really finish it off. And then of course after the carburetor cleaner, I can use compressed air. That's all clean, so now it's time to reassemble the pump. The primer on the intake is dry, so it's now ready for a petrol resistant top coat. Now for the carburetor reassembly. So these screws, these mixture screws, will need to be set. They need to be fine-tuned once the engine is running, but just initially they need to be screwed in fully, and then you need to back out a turn and a half. And there we go, that is the carburetor finished, all fitted to the engine. Before the reassembly can progress further, I do have a few parts to powder coat. With these parts ready, I can now finish the top section of the engine. I'm fitting a brand new ignition coil. The other one did work, but this is just to really guarantee that it's going to keep working well in the future. And the piece of card is so I can set the air gap. Fitting a reconditioned starter motor, which I did earlier. And the muffler, which I have painted in heatproof paint. It will probably smoke quite a bit once I first start the engine, but it will soon burn off. Okay, right, moving on to the 5-speed manual gearbox. As you can see, it's absolutely filthy and would benefit from a really good wash. This gearbox will be fully disassembled, cleaned, re-greased, and then rebuilt. So the first thing to come off is the pulley. Of course, the pulley is stuck. Luckily, it's not too stuck, so the puller did get it off with ease. We have the brake assembly on the side. The brakes don't work, they have totally seized up. Very common with this type of gearbox because the grass does fire out of the deck onto the brakes, but it is relatively easy to clean providing the bolts don't shear off. Luckily they didn't, so that makes it so much easier. There's the old brake pad. I'll be fitting new brake pads later. That's most of the bolts removed, but there's always one which lurks in here. Very easy to miss. Usually covered in debris. But it does need to be removed. And now for the grand reveal. Chocolate! No wait, definitely not chocolate. Dirty old grease. So I'm going to have to scoop all of this out of here, make it nice and clean, and then put new grease in. But the gears, everything actually, the differential, it all looks really good. I can't see any chipped teeth. Seems like a good gearbox. So now I just need to remove everything very carefully. First of all, the differential, and then all of the gears, the gear shifter. You can see there is some glitter in the grease. It's not a concern. Naturally, things do wear. But as I said, everything looks great. This is very easy to miss, and it will make it very hard to use the gearbox without it. Little ball bearing and a spring. These are used to actually shift the gears. It's what the shifter runs on. Simple, but crucial. Just removing the input pulley, and I will be changing all of the bearings. There are two which go on the axles. There is one which goes on the side of the gears, and also there'll be two roller bearings which are used on the input shaft. Whilst the majority of the grease scooped out, I can now clean both of these two halves in the hot washer. That's a good initial clean. I will be cleaning them further, but first I need to press out the old roller bearings. Now everything has been thoroughly cleaned, I can give the two halves a good clear coat. This will prevent them from oxidizing again in the future. Since all the components are looking really good, they just need to be thoroughly cleaned, and then I can reassemble the gearbox. The differential requires very little work. I just need to remove the two snap rings so that I can take the axle shafts out, to press the old bearings off and then to slide the new bearings on. Everything is coming together really well. Now it's time for some new grease. I may be wrong, but I don't think this particular type of gearbox is sealed from the factory. So I'm going to seal it just to prevent any moisture from getting in. And now for the all-important ball and spring. First the ball, then the spring. Again, before I can go any further, I do need to powder coat a few parts. Since I have the powder coating set up out, I'm going to do the fuel tank, but it's more the pulley that I need to do for the gearbox. Just need to bake them for 10 minutes at 180 degrees Celsius. With that done, I can now finish working on the gearbox. I just have the brakes to do. The two plungers are stuck. These do seize in here very easily, but a bit of lubricating oil can help to free them off. One of them was really bad, so I had to press it out. But once these have been sandblasted, they'll move very freely in there. With all the parts cleaned up, I can now use copper grease to prevent them from seizing again. As mentioned earlier as well, I do have new brake pads. A quick test of the brakes. So you can see that is applying the brake. And the gearbox is finished. All of the parts are now back from being sandblasted and powder coated, and they look absolutely amazing. I can now start to reassemble the entire machine. The very first thing to do is to install the bronze bushing for the clutch brake pedal. These are brand new clutch jockey pulleys. I don't think I really showed this on the disassembly, but this is the hanger bar for the deck. We've got to the stage where I need to start to install the wiring. I can't fit the entire loom, but it needs to be here. So I'm just going to draw up a quick wiring diagram so I know exactly how to recreate the existing wiring loom. And that will give me something to follow whilst I create the new loom. And there it is. There are a few little bits and bobs that still need to be added, but that is the vast majority of it. Back to the reassembly. I've got the loom partially in. Now I can continue fitting all the various parts, and then once the console is on, I can complete fitting the wiring loom. As I'm currently working at the back of the machine, I'm just going to very quickly make the rubber deflector flap. I can put that assembly together. And now back to the middle of the machine, starting with the steering quadrant, and then I can build up from there and put the console on. And now to the front of the machine, I've got the front axle. Obviously there's two stub axles, the main support frame at the front. It's also what the snowplow is mounted to. And now I'm ready for the engine. As with all of my restorations, I do like to use genuine parts whenever I can do, so I'm now using genuine fuel lines as well. I used to use non-genuine, but really it goes very rigid and it's not easy to work with after even a few months, so that probably doesn't apply to all fuel line, but certainly what I was using before, it wasn't great. So I'm using genuine. Time to get the machine on its wheels. So I've got brand new tyres and the rims have been powder coated. First though, I do need to fit the oil light bushings. I'm sticking with the original idea on the back as well, so I've got chevron tread tyres for extra grip. It's now time to start recreating the decals. I have saved all of the original ones, so I'm going to create them all in one document and then I can get them printed on vinyl. And there we go, back from the printers, looking very nice. It's time to fit these to the machine. It's already starting to come together, but next I need to reassemble the bonnet. As you can see, I'm not using the original white grille. Sadly, it had melted very badly and it was beyond repair, so I'm using the black grille, which was still used on some models, so that is absolutely fine. It is still original. I also managed to source a replacement headlight. Time for just a few more finishing touches. I've got some foot pads. That is the tractor part done. Now I just have the deck to reassemble. As usual, I'm fitting all new bearings. It's a brand new timing belt. It is essential that the blades are timed, otherwise they'll clash into each other. I'm using this foam tape, which was actually used originally. It should prevent dirt from getting in and also prevent vibration between the two metal pieces. And now finally for the big blade discs with brand new blade tips. Just need to add the anti-scalp wheels, and the cutting deck is finished. And last but not least, the snowplow. This will be a very fast reassembly. After hundreds of hours of work, the machine is finished. The only thing left to do now is to try it out. A quick demonstration of the snowplow going up and down. Obviously I can't show you it in action because there's no snow, but when there is, I will hopefully show you. Anyway, first start. As as is the case after nearly all engine rebuilds, it will smoke because of all the assembly lubrication which is still in there. It will burn off eventually, but yes, don't be alarmed when you see all the smoke when I start mowing. It's working really well, but yes, this grass is extremely long. And there we have it, the Westwood Gazelle W16 restoration. It leaves a pretty clean cut, especially when you consider how long this grass was before. Anyway, the only thing for me to do is to leave you with a before and after picture. I really hope you've enjoyed this restoration. It has taken months, about 5 months, a lot of work and well, obviously a lot of money. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one. Bye for now.